I can hear you. I think we can start, and sorry for the technical difficulties.
No
Uh, so,
worries.
Hello. So, I'm Raigardas Boruta, an associate expert at the Eastern Europe Studies Center, and I'm very excited to introduce Quo vadis China, a brand new podcast from the Eastern Europe Studies Center, which is at the same time the first ever China-focused podcast in Lithuania. Quo vadis China aims to provide informative and insightful discussions on current events, historical context, and the political and economic landscape of China. With the help of special guests from various fields, that podcast will explore different perspectives and viewpoints to provide a well-rounded analysis of complex issues that are relevant not only on a regional but also on a global scale. I would like to introduce my co-host, who is Elze Pinarite, a research intern at the Eastern Europe Studies Center. Elze is currently pursuing a dual master's degree in international governance and diplomacy at the Paris Institute of Political Studies and Peking University. Hello, Elze.
Hello, Raigadas. It's my pleasure to co-host this inaugural episode with you, considering that, as you mentioned, the podcast itself is the first ever Lithuania think tank podcast about China. And I think it's groundbreaking, to say the least, to finally open conversations about China and discuss, explore new ideas and concepts.
Yeah, exactly. And in our inaugural episode, we are going to discuss about China's two sessions that were just concluded on the 13th of March. And we're going to talk about its significance, the processes involved, and how it differs from other important Chinese political events. One of the main highlights of the two sessions is, of course, the government work report and the shift in the personnel and at the highest levels. What does it tell us about where is China heading to and what can we expect from it this year? But first of all, I think before we dive into the main topic, we should maybe talk about why China should matter and what do you think about our active interest in China and why it is important to even talk about this country. So maybe you can share with us what exactly drew you to study and to learn about China and what kept you
Mhm,
continuing to
mhm,
unravel the complicated China's threats.
mhm, mhm, mhm. Thank you for your question, Regadas. So yes, throughout my adolescence and early adulthood, I have really manifested a strong admiration and curiosity for the Asia region and this vast, distant country, China in particular. And actually, this specific interest was sparked by my dear beloved grandmother, as we used to have thought-provoking conversations about China's growing presence and assertiveness that is now popularly touted as China's rise on the global stage. We would argue that China is a waking dragon that one day will roar back so loudly that will make us awake to China's rise. And so eventually, these conversations really subconsciously influenced my decision to pursue an undergrad degree in sinology in my home country, and it was complemented by my several years spent studying and living in China. And as you mentioned, I'm currently pursuing a dual master's degree between science, Po, and Peking University. And this formative and ongoing academic and now professional experience really gave me this realization that it is sorely indispensable to have a comprehensive understanding of country's language, culture, and history before entering into any cross-cultural dialogue based on mutual respect, temperance, and open-mindedness, because otherwise the myopic attitude will lead to be caught in a narrative trap. And being mindful of those cultural differences and having a healthy dose of critical thinking has become, my forma mentis, a way of thinking. And being equipped with this forma mentis, I have started seeing vexing false narratives embedded in our Western mindset, translated into anxiety, fear, implicit prejudice towards China, which does not add up to the actual reality. And thus, China becomes very sensitive, polarizing topic, I believe, and I think it's most really related to the confluence of events related to China and how they're being framed in traditional media or social media. Um, and when it's so much going on, it's hard to capture the attention, which leads to sticking to those false narratives, which is easier. For example, China being an existential threat to the entirety of the 21st century, or every single liberal value that we hold. And when you frame China like this, it's like you begin to adopt a very adversarial approach and to sow the seeds of moral panic. But what I've been fretted about for the last years is that even though the scope, the depth, and the gravity we engage with China has increased immensely, and we don't seek to understand how China thinks and why it thinks that way. And I think these conversations really will equip this ability to render this a sheet of paper, a comprehensive contextual paper that will add light and the heat to the discourse of China. So our audience could become citizen scholars with honed critical thinking, I believe.
Yeah, the great ideas and great that you have shared your opinion, and I really agree with you. And I also think that we just some time ago we mentioned that it's the first podcast in Lithuania that focuses on China, and I think it is very important, especially because I think that even 1 decade ago, when we talk about China in Lithuania, a lot of people still think that it's a very exotic country far away, and it doesn't really have a lot of influence on our daily lives. But given our recent diplomatic kind of war with China, I think that a lot of people realize that China is much closer than were we were thinking in the past. So I think that one of the main reasons why why we have created this podcast is to try to help people understand China, because China is a very complicated country. It's not complicated because of its quite unique political system, hybrid political system, but also because the old culture and old concepts are underpinned within this politics. So it is quite difficult to understand some of the aspects of Chinese politics if you don't have a bit deeper knowledge about the Chinese culture and Chinese the ancient philosophy. So I think that one of our main aims is to help people to understand that it's complicated, but it is still possible to understand it.
Indeed, indeed. I think there are realities, whether it be biological or economic realities, that make us really intertwined with China. And there should be no ignoring of that. You cannot squeeze China in a corner and close doors and be ignorant. We need to understand China inside out because it's critical for our understanding of the modern world, as you
Yes,
mentioned.
yes. Yes, I completely agree with you. And the first topic that we have chosen is quite relevant because this event just concluded almost 2 weeks ago. And I think that it's important to talk about it because in the media, I think that not that much was covered about the China's two sessions. And I think it is not as important as the Chinese Communist Party Congress that was held in October last year. But I still think that we should try to introduce what is two sessions and what can we learn about where China is heading this year?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's China's biggest political legislative gathering, the most important event on the Chinese political calendar. So it's really important to unravel what was introduced during what new realities unfolded during two sessions. So. May you elaborate what is the two sessions for our audience?
Yeah, I think this first question is very important because in the English language media, you can see that this term two sessions is used quite often, but not a lot of people know why it is called two sessions because people mostly talk about the National People's Congress, but this term refers to two sessions that are being held at the same time. So we are talking about National People's Congress and the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference. So the main difference between them is that the National People's Congress is China's top legislative body, responsible for making and amending laws and approving major policy initiatives and electing the top leadership in the government. While the political consultative conference is a political advisory body that provides recommendations and suggestions to the government and the CCP. And I think that within the consultative conference, there are a lot of people from various sectors of society, including business, academia, and the arts. And I think we can also give an example. I think almost all the people in the world should know Jackie Chan, and he is, as a matter of fact, also participating in this consultative conference as a member. So the specter of people participating in this advisory body is huge, but it doesn't really have any real power.
Yes, also the tech firm giant tycoons, Jack Ma, the chairman of Alibaba. But it's really interesting to know that actually the internet entrepreneurs were not invited this time. And instead, you could see people who are working in the key technology, whether it be AI, semiconductors, and this really signals one of the Xi Jinping's one of the key priorities that we will be talking about is self-reliance in science and technology.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I think that people don't often go into the details. And the thing that you have mentioned just now about the absence of people from the specific field, it looks like a small detail, but it does say a lot about the trajectory that the China and the government is going under the Xi Jinping. And can you explain how does it exactly differ from the National Party Congress, which happened in October last year? Is there a significant difference between these congresses, or the difference is very minimal?
Mhm. Well, indeed, uh, uh, the question for a lot of people may arise: how does it differ from the 20th National Congress of the Chinese Communist Party, which happened in October? A lot of confusion comes between the distinctions. Uh, I would say that uh, that the two sessions and the party congress both feature large gatherings of delegates but represent different aspects of the Chinese political system. Uh, I would assume that the National Congress is largely a ceremonial affair. Many of the key appointments were already announced, uh, and decided at a twice a decade party congress in October. All the personal changes, central committee retirements, new appointments, promotions. So two sessions we can consider as more a ceremonial affair. The top level appointments are the most important feature of the two sessions. Also, I would say that the National Congress of the Chinese Communist Party unfolds China's political direction, economic agenda for the next 5 years. And during the two sessions, it reiterates. And I believe nothing new during two sessions can be really much anticipated because it's already scripted in the Congress that happened in October.
Exactly. And I think that it is important to uh, explain like the one of the like essence of the Chinese politics is that the Chinese government that the elections were held during the two sessions. So the Chinese government is essentially the shadow of the Communist Party, and it is moving as the party does. And the consequently, government roles matter not as much as the party ones. So while we just had the election for the presidential title in China, and Xi Jinping became the president for the third term, but his actual power derives from his role as a general secretary of the party, not as the president. So these roles are more ceremonial. And if we talk about, for example, foreign affairs, so Minister of Foreign Affairs has less executive power compared to the director, to the director of the Central Foreign Affairs Commission, that is a body within the Chinese Communist Party. So I think that this difference and these details make Chinese politics quite complicated to understand. But the government and Communist Party sometimes this difference and this line between them, it is quite difficult to see in case of China.
Mhm, mhm. Yes, indeed. The major personal changes, the reshuffle of the top government jobs, as you mentioned, the premier, the vice premiers, the vice president, and then President Xi Jinping himself, who solidifies his power for his third 5 year term. He was unanimously elected president of the People's Republic of China and chairman of the Central Military Commission of the PRC by 2,952 members to zero. In favor of Xi, there was no other candidate. But it is more the formal reason. But the second most substantive imperative reason is that the ex-premier Li Keqiang delivered what is called a government work report that summarizes China's key policies in the previous year, puts and explains its priorities and announced policies involving the economy, military, trade, diplomacy, the environment, and more for 2023. So, in terms of the top priorities for 2023, we can really see the, the emphasis on the restoration and stabilization and economic growth. And interestingly, Chinese Premier Li Keqiang mentioned the word stability, 稳定, 33 times in his government report, summarizing China's key policies. And actually, it's 38% more times this year than in 2022, marking stability as a guiding rhetoric for 2023. So this is the keyword stability underscores China's aim, as I mentioned, to restore and stabilize economic growth after the economic annus horribilis, if you may say, 3 years of pandemic controls, the property downturn and a crackdown on private enterprise, also increasing youth unemployment, to say the least, with China's growth at only 3%, which stands in stark contrast to China's official target of 5.5%. And could you clarify what percent is estimated for this year for the economic growth? It's
So according to the government work report, the government set the economic growth target at around 5%. And I think this word around is has started to appear only like quite recently because the Chinese economy is not as stable as before. So the government tries to be more careful with with its predictions. But if you look at the prediction made by International Monetary Fund, it seems that the target that the China has chosen is in line with this organization's predictions of a little bit more than 5% of economic growth this year. So I think that the Chinese government is being quite careful, but I think that after the end of this zero COVID policy, this economic growth of around 5% is quite possible, I would say.
Indeed. And I think it's important for us to discuss the instruments for the economy revitalization. And one of the instruments that been outlined is uh, private consumption, consumer spending back in the harness. It is possible as a zero COVID policy no longer applies, and that should boost consumers' confidence. However, we have already seen some huge policy errors in China. For example, last month on February 15th, I believe, Chinese retirees protested against cuts in government provided medical insurance for seniors due to heavy spending on zero COVID measures. And this is actually precisely the opposite of what is needed for consumer-led economy rebalancing, as cuts to benefits encourage this precautionary saving and inhibits discretionary consumption. Uh, for example, China's gross domestic savings as percentage of GDP is 45% compared with an average of 28.6% in Lithuania. So it really signals about the continuation of saving at record levels. And another crucial tool of revitalizing the economy is getting private sector back in harness. But it is much more problematic because we know the whole assault of on the platform economy, the crackdown on major private tech firms, in particular the Alibaba itself. They have lost the confidence in recent years. But however, Li Keqiang himself gave reassuring words that he stated that we should encourage and support the private sector and private business in growing and expanding. And also, Xi Jinping himself encouraged the private sector, but also reminded business people of their social responsibilities, that they must eventually work with the CCP, not against it. He said that private entrepreneurs are our own people. So he says like a welcome, but also a warning. And this is actually where the central dilemma within the contemporary Chinese political economy unravels, which is competing tensions of Marxist-Leninist ideological orthodoxy and the pragmatic challenge of restoring and maintaining economic growth, which is the tracks on which political legitimacy of the party rides. And to be more precisely, to elaborate for our audience, is a Marxist-Leninist party seeking to continue its ideological orthodoxy through a status intervention and control of the economy, while at the same time recognizing that in doing so they're in danger of producing growth outcome, which not only compromises the long-standing unspoken social contract with the Chinese people of rising living standards, rising income and employment, but also possibly compromising the grand national objective of the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. And a lot of analysts really mule whether these two objectives can be compatible, pursued in tandem in a productive way. And I think it's an open question. It's China's beginning of giant experimentation in the following years.
Yeah, it's just a really great overview of the what is happening in the Chinese economy and what is the government trying to do to keep economy moving and to keep economic growth. And after the COVID pandemic and the zero COVID policy, I think that it will not be very easy, but we can see from the work report that China is really paying a lot attention to the economic stability and growth. But I think when we look at the international media, of course, media's attention is often on Chinese economy. But I think this year especially, we can see that the military aspect of this within the work report also gained a lot of attention this year. One of the key targets set by the work report was the military modernization. And from the work report, we can see that defense spending is set to increase by more than 7%, and it will reach around 224 billion US dollars. But while this increase looks quite significant, I would say, but this change in military spending should not be too surprising, as this marks the eighth consecutive year of this stable increase in defense spending in China. And interestingly, the growth far exceeds the 5.7 increase in general government public expenditure, which is, I think, a really important sign that Beijing is doubling down on its efforts to modernize its defenses. And when we talk about the regional, the situation in the region, uh, China is the China is the leader when it comes to defense spending, because according to the Center for Strategic and International Studies, for example, in 2021, China spent more on defense than the 13 Indo-Pacific economies combined. So while China has become the world's second largest defense budget, but if we attempt to compare it with the US, China still lags far, far behind, which with US defense budget this year totaling a little bit more than 800 billion US dollars. So I think it is still significant difference in the military spending, and in Chinese media, it is often emphasized that China is still spending much more in terms of its GDP to the defense for the defense compared to the US, as a sign that US is the one that is starting this arms race, but China doesn't want to give in. So this aspect that China is still spending much less compared to US is very much present in the Chinese media.
Yes, but we still talk about the hate and military spending. I think it really corresponds to what Li Keqiang referred to China's worsening strategic environment and its growing tensions with the United States. On March the 2nd, the United States added 37 entities to its trade blacklist, and at least 18 China-based firms have been included for supporting the PRC's military modernizations efforts, or for supplying or attempting to supply a sanctioned entity in Iran. And last year in December, United States President Joe Biden signed a record-breaking 800 billion Department of Defense budget for 2023, and China is one clear focus. But also, I would like to say that coupled with this military modernization, other factors are at play. China has built the largest navy in the world, saw that it is saw in the fact to control the South China Sea, pressing Japan and India over disputed territories. China refused to renounce the use of force to achieve unification with Taiwan, and therefore, as the strategic environment within East Asia and the West Indo-Pacific is deteriorating, those dramatic tectonic movements into security architecture, countries are now really looking to their national defense capabilities with scrutiny. Both Japan and Taiwan have announced landmark changes within the last year to beef up their defenses in an effort to deter China's growing military might. Taiwan, as we know, extended its mandatory military service for young men from 4 months to 1 year, beginning in 2024, while Japan announced that it would double its defense spending over the next 5 years to 2% of its GDP.
Yes, yes. I think that, when we talk about China's modernization, it is moving in really significant steps, and we all can also see uh, when we analyze the China's actions abroad when it comes to its military, we can see that scope of activities is increasing. And just to give some examples, just a few days ago, China, Russia, and Iran held joint military drills in the Gulf of Oman, and some time before, Russia, China, and South Africa also had drills of the South African coast. So you can see that the scope of activities that China is undertaking abroad is increasing, and we also see much more reports talking about the secret or not so secret military bases being established in other parts of the world. So China has big ambitions, and I think that is moving towards them. And well, in this work report, I think another important and significant focal point was with regards to self-reliance and science and technology, I would think, right?
Right. Another imperative has undoubtedly been becoming self-reliant, 自立自强 in science and technology, literally meaning standing up by yourself and being strong by yourself. For Xi Jinping, achieving national self-reliance, particularly in indigenous technology and science, has become a key strategic priority. And this ambition is actually clearly made in the Made in China 2025 strategy, which identifies 10 core technologies where China would need to prevail. And the strategy sets targets for China to be 70% nationally self-sufficient by 2025, and then global dominant in all sectors by mid-century. However, China actually has already missed its target of 40% self-sufficiency by 2020, and is more than likely to fall short of its 2025 objective of 70%. Instead, achieving perhaps 20 to 25%. So it's not then surprising that Xi Jinping during two sessions stated that consolidating and enhancing integrated national strategies and strategic capabilities must draw momentum, building high-level self-reliance and strength in science and technology at a faster pace. However, this statement is really shadowed by what the United States and Western allies are currently doing. They have been shoring up efforts to clip the wings of China's self-sufficiency ambitions. For example, Dutch and Germans have uh, turned technology hawks. The Dutch, the eternal facilitizers of free trade, blocked exports of advanced chip printers to China, following the United States' lead in efforts to choke off China from those cutting edge chip supplies. Germany is also stepping out of its Merkel era quadriphilia, if we may say. Olaf Scholz's government is making a 5G U-turn and is preparing to force telecom companies to rip equipment made by China's Huawei and ZTE out of their networks. And also TikTok, China's most successful social media export, is also facing bans, restrictions, and inquiries in Europe and the United States. As we have heard from the European Union institutions introduced a ban on the app on officials' devices over data security concerns. Whereas in the United States, TikTok might be completely banned. And actually, today, TikTok's CEO is set to testify before a United States House committee to convince Washington not to ban the popular Chinese owned social media app from the country over the fears that Chinese government might be able to access its users.
Yes, I think it was one of the most discussed news regarding TikTok, and we can see a lot of news media reports about that. And I think that TikTok is undergoing huge challenges in the world because being really very successful social media platform, I think that some very drastic decisions have to be made in order to keep TikTok alive abroad and not just within China. I think that we can see that China appears to be overhauling its tech sector to focus on strategic areas, and this building of self-sufficiency in key technologies is really evident. For example, China's finance ministry and state planner, the National Development and Reform Commission, followed up on Xi Jinping's pledge with plans to boost special funds to support chip development and other key industrial sectors by nearly 50% from last year. So the efforts is really evident in especially in the Chinese government's funds and increase in funds especially.
Yes, and I think with these priorities in mind, the new members and the new faces were selected, appointed accordingly. So we can talk about the personal overhaul now, about the new members and new faces. And in terms of the members themselves, an unusual and important new faction has emerged at the tops of China's political system: military, industrial, technocrats. Uh, when the Chinese Communist Party closed its 20th Party Congress in October, 13 new members joined the 24-member Politburo, the party's top leadership body, and five of those rising stars, so-called military industrial five, been sharing notable similarities, including an educational background in military industrial engineering, professional experience in China's military industrial sector, and a career transformation from engineer managers to local now national political leaders. And this new set of leaders are colloquially known as the military industrial group, Pai, or military industrial gang. And these military industrial engineer managers are especially qualified to meet the CCP's criteria for cadre promotions, and namely in Mao's words, they're very both read and expert, or in post-Mao CCP jargon, we can say they're scientifically accomplished, business savvy, and trusted loyalists. And I think this is all the valid qualities in top leadership under Xi. And as such, they reflect Xi's preferred governance model. He favors those military industrial engineer manager because he expects them to incorporate their experience in the wider spectrum of China's governments. As we've been talking till now, the pivotal their pivotal Chinese priorities, the three crucial areas: economic development, technological advancement, and relations abroad, especially regarding the increasingly contentious rivalry with the United States. So I think these new members really tap into the Xi Jinping's vision of and the preference of his governance model.
Yeah, exactly. And when we talk about the personal overhaul, I think the two most important positions for us, I would say it will be the position of Premier and the Minister of Foreign Affairs. So maybe we can just get into a bit more details about who are these newly elected people. And the new premier of China is Li Qiang. But first, of course, it will be important to note that the premier is the head of government, which certainly sounds important. And in theory, he's also the second most powerful person in China after Xi Jinping. But in practice, though, there is no clearly defined role. And the real power is, I would say, since Xi Jinping came to power, is increasingly limited. Uh, Li Qiang's own appointment was effectively made last year. As we talked earlier, the party Congress is the main decision-making body, and the results showed that Li Qiang, who walked out second on stage after Xi Jinping as a new member of the standing committee, is positioned to become the premier. And this the vote that recently happened just shows that that all the predictions were correct. So the 63-year-old Li Qiang has been in public service for almost all his life, but he'll be the first premier since the founding of the People's Republic never to have served previously in the central government. And when you talk about the relationship between Xi Jinping and Li Qiang, so from 2004 and 2007, Li Qiang was Xi Jinping's de facto chief of staff during its party role in Zhejiang, and it was, as some analysts say, instrumental to Xi Jinping's political rise. So Li Qiang is also seen as a pro-business person, especially during his tenure in Shanghai, but he also received a lot of criticisms due to the handling of the pandemic in Shanghai, of which he was the Secretary General. And But some analysts say that, unlike his predecessors, Li is unlikely to develop any kind of higher profile of his own, and he is much more likely to be known for his role as some sort of advisor to Xi Jinping. And what do you think about the new foreign minister, Qin Gang, who used to be the Chinese ambassador to the US?
Yes, Qin Gan, the former Chinese ambassador to the United States and now foreign minister. A wolf in sheep's clothing. The comeback to wolfier diplomacy. What comes to my mind?
Yes.
So recently, foreign minister, the previous foreign minister Wang Yi, recent tour to Europe, he launched a charming offensive, and one could infer from that that Wolf War diplomacy has retired. However, the newly elected foreign minister Qin has proved conversely, as Beijing continues to harden its stance against Washington. Qin warned that if the United States does not hit the brake but continues to speed down the wrong path, no amount of guardrails can prevent derailing, and there will surely be conflict and confrontation. And it's actually really unusual for a foreign minister of the PRC to point to the possible inevitability of the conflict with the United States. And also, Qin himself, he claimed that the warfare diplomacy is a narrative trap. However, made a statement that in China's diplomacy, there is no shortage of goodwill and kindness, but if faced with wolves, jackals, Chinese diplomats, we have no choice but to confront them and dance with them, with those wolves. And those wolves are the hostile foreign forces. And I think it really is in tandem with what Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian has said 2 years ago. We treat our friends with fine wine, but for our enemies, we have shotguns. So I believe the Qingan election, it proves that Wolf War diplomacy is not retired, but it's got like re-emerged, and Qingan is doubling down on that. And also, I believe it's important to pinpoint the relationship with Europe and where Lithuania stands here. Qingan stated that China all along sees the European Union as a comprehensive strategic partner. And actually, this year marks the 20th anniversary of comprehensive strategic partnership between China and the EU. And also, he pointed that the China-Europe relationship is not targeted at any third party or subjected to or controlled by any third party. So from this, you can really infer one important aspect that Europeans should always keep in mind is that Beijing still primarily sees its relationship with the EU as a part of its geopolitical contest with the United States. That is to say, China views the EU as part of the West, the United States dominated bloc, with which it's bounded to engage in rivalry and geopolitical struggle. So it is not surprising that Xinjiang has sounded the clarion call for the European Union's strategic autonomy. But I would see that for now, Beijing does not have tangible vision for its relationship with the EU when tensions peak after the Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And President Xi Jinping himself used the EU-China summit in April 2022 to state that China's vision remains unchanged. And I believe that it's more uh, of the act of stalling coming from China, rather acting and deepening cooperation in the context of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And currently, I believe that the three goals that Tingan alluded to during two sessions uh, guiding Beijing policy toward the EU is that the limiting its into United States-led containment initiatives, limited restrictions on China's access to EU technology, and limiting restrictions on access to the EU market, while Beijing develops domestic consumption and expands exports to growing markets in the global south.
Yeah, exactly. And I I think we can state that the Wolf Warrior diplomacy is not going anywhere. We have Qinggang as the new Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and we have Wang Yi, who is also quite well known as the kind of Wolf Warrior, and he's the new director of Central Foreign Affairs Commission. And just one more thing about Qinggang. As far as I know, domestically, he's relatively well known due to his time as a spokesperson of the Foreign Ministry's Information Department, during which he became known for his quite an aggressive approach to some of the tougher reporters' questions. And he's also seen as a person who never beats around the bush. So I think that the Wolf Warrior diplomacy is not going anywhere, and we might see a very interesting and warrior-like statements from this new foreign minister in the future. And I think a good way to conclude with this first podcast, which was about the two sessions and the results that came after it. I think it would be very nice to conclude it with an interesting insight that I know that you have about the very unique 24 character phrase that China uses, that China releases
Yes.
during after the two sessions conclude. So can you introduce what was the new 24 Chinese character phrase that shows like the overall vision of China's strategy under Xi Jinping?
Yes, as our conversation is drawing to an end, I think that one thing that can perfectly illuminate, explain, and conclude China's strategy outlined during two sessions meeting for 2023 and years to come is a new 24 character phrase by Xi Jinping, 二十四自觉, which says that China must keep calm, stay focused, strive for progress while maintaining stability, be proactive, unite as one under party, and have the courage to fight, struggle. And it stands in a sharp contrast actually with Deng Xiaoping's 24 character strategy, with his maxim about China hiding strength, biding time, and never taking the lead. And now Xi abandons, lets goes the cautious approach, and it is less risk averse and risk embracing. It is more energetic, more proactive. And furthermore, in his speech, he uses a phrase from a 300-year-old Qing dynasty poem, Bamboo in a Stone, by a calligrapher and poet Zheng Xie, who is apparently a favorite of Xi's. And this phrase really captures the essence of the 24 characters used by Xi Jinping, which is 咬定青山不放松, tenacious like bamboo, rooted in the roots of the mountain. And the bamboo itself, it's a metaphor for being tough and holding on to your position no matter what the world throws at you, while also being proactive and gaining ground where possible. So I think it really encapsulates the China strategy for 2023 and moving forward. China stood during Mao Zhanxilai, during Deng era. China got rich 富起来, and I think during Xi era, China now supposes to become strong 强起来, and bamboo is a great metaphor to encapsulate this overarching goal of Xi Jinping.
Yeah, thank you, Ilse. It was very interesting and great insight, and I think it also partly answers our the question in our title of this first podcast about China's two sessions, a glimpse into the future. And I think this very unique 24 character phrase that was said at the end of the two sessions meeting, it really encapsulates the meaning what China is trying to become under the leadership of Xi Jinping, and especially to unite as one under the party and have the courage to fight or and struggle. I think it very encapsulates what where China is heading and what it is China's two sessions. What can we see from the results of this political event in China? So thank you, Elsa, and thank you to anyone who were listening to us. And we hope that you will follow the Eastern Europe Studies Center and follow the notifications about our upcoming podcast in which we are planning to invite a very interesting speakers and just please follow the page and thank you for listening and bye bye.
Thank you, Regulus. It was my pleasure to co-hosting this inaugural episode. I'm looking forward for the next one. Bye. Thank you.